Okay. Hey, Erev Tov. I'd like to start today by telling you that we're going to study some sources of Rav Kook in English, not because I found some hidden archive with Rav Kook's writings in English, but I'll tell you what I did. I performed an experiment, and we'll see how it worked. I think it came out pretty good, but we'll wait to hear from you. And we're talking about maybe, finishing the study of this topic and moving on to study some things about Rav Kook. If we do, I'd like to ask you a couple of options. Please remind me at the end what topic within Rav Kook's teachings might we study. But if this experiment works, then maybe we could do that with Rav Kook as well, because some things I have one book of Rav Kook with a lot of English, a lot of Rav Kook in English, but most of it does not exist in English. Rav Kook's Hebrew is difficult for natural Hebrew speakers. It's very philosophical, very abstract. It has Kabbalic terminology, and it's a little hard to follow. What I did is I took Rav Kook's the paragraphs I wanted from Rav Kook. I took his Hebrew and made it a little shorter, made it more simple, and with more modern Hebrew, more direct, simple Hebrew. And then I asked my good friend ChatGPT to help me out in English. And I think it came out pretty clear. So now I'm going to ask you, we're going to study 2 paragraphs in Rav Kook and tell me what you think. Are they clear or not? So here you have, right here, this is from a compilation called Orot Israel. Most of Rav Kook's writings were not written as we meet them by Rav Kook, meaning not that someone else wrote them or forged them, but that Rav Kook wrote mostly very intuitively and spontaneously. He was a very intense spiritual person, intellectual and spiritual, and things came out of him. He just wrote them down on paper, put them in notebooks, all kinds of things, like a very rich fountain, writing and writing and writing, putting down ideas. And mostly he did not sit and think, what do I want to say? Stage A, that will bring us to B, will bring us to C, will bring us to D. It wasn't a planned structure of what he was saying. Some writings are like that, but most of his writing is just very rich and spontaneous. And then his students, his son Rav Tzvi Yehuda, or his student, the Nazir, Rav David Cohen, and maybe others, came and tried to put things in order. So Rav Tzvi Yehuda took a lot of paragraphs that he wrote about Orot Israel, Am Israel, and put them together in, I think it's 9 or 10 chapters. So that's what I'm taking from, but it doesn't originate in this compilation. It was put together by Rav Tzvi Yehuda, but nonetheless, let's see the content itself. So I don't know if this is 100% Rav Kook. Maybe it's not 100% Rav Kook. Maybe I changed something, but that's not the point. The point is, what can we take from it? How can it enrich our lives and make the world better? So this is Rav Kook Lights of Israel. I'm just going to read it. I think it's clear, but you'll tell me. 2 paragraphs, chapter 5, paragraph 14, and then paragraph 15. Let's see. The people of Israel hold a secret that has the potential to bring life to the entire world on a national level. It is a commonly accepted idea that every nation will eventually disappear from the world. After all the ancient nations have vanished. And if there is an ancient nation that hasn't been scattered, it also hasn't had a significant influence on the world. But to be a living, active nation, strong enough to overcome any crisis, that is something unique in the world, found only in the people of Israel through the name of God, connected to them and the Torah that lives within. And this is destined to spread from us to the entire world. So should I explain something? You want to look at it, let it sink in? Is it clear? It seems pretty straightforward to me. Should I explain something?
Language is very clear. There's only one thing I don't understand.
Okay.
That's in the first sentence, to bring life to the entire world on a national level. It's not clear to me what a national level is.
Okay, what he means is given that we see that ancient nations have dispersed, have vanished, have mixed with other nations, maybe I should say ancient empires. Every great nation that was very famous and powerful and influential at one time has eventually vanished. And if not, it's because they weren't scattered. I think of Chinese, they stayed in their place and they were never scattered. And they didn't have a significant influence on the world. They stayed within themselves. They didn't communicate very intensely with other nations. And so they stayed in their own world. But to be a living, active nation that on the one hand tries to have an influence on the world and is in communication with other nations, and on the other hand, faced very many situations of crisis, and yet to survive this and remain that nation, maybe we've gone through all kinds of evolutions and developments, but we are Am Yisrael. That is something that is found only in Am Yisrael because of the Shem Hashem, the name of God connected with us, and the Torah that gives us, sustains us throughout all these perils and challenges and so on. And we want to give, and we are destined to give this potion of life, so to speak, to all the other nations. And that way, other nations will also be able to continue and not to eventually disappear. That's why he says we have potential to bring life to other nations, to the entire world on a national level. If other nations take from us the Noahide laws, the Emunah, and keep it as an ideal for their nation, it will give their nation sustenance. It will sustain their nation for much longer than what we've seen in the past. And in that way, we have potential to give life to other nations, to give life to the entire world at a national level. Okay? Okay, anybody else want to ask something or comment on this paragraph?
I just want to mention something. I just want to, it's not connected to this directly, but in Makor Rishon, there was somebody wrote an article, and it said on the bottom that he is a Noahide.
Okay, Ben Noach.
Yeah, Ben Noach, and I thought it was so nice.
Yeah, he keeps the laws of Bnei Noach. Yafe.
Very nice. I thought it was nice. Sorry.
Yafe.
I'm highlighting a sentence here in the second paragraph because I understand what you said about its meaning, but it wasn't conveyed when I read it the first time or when you read it. And it's the second sentence of the second paragraph. And if there is an ancient nation that hasn't been scattered, it also hasn't had a significant influence on the world. And you use the example of China, which I think is a perfect example, because China, I think, is an example, a very powerful example, almost unique, that has survived from ancient times to current times, and in fact has revived itself, not in the same way as Israel, but it used to be a great nation, and then it disappeared for a long time, and now it has reappeared as we had, but it hasn't been scattered, as you say. So,
and I think also it hasn't been an ongoing conversation and communication with the rest of the world.
Stuff that we have is from China. Rockets, for example, are Chinese. Gunpowder is Chinese. Confucianism, Eastern philosophy, I think. There's been permeation. East means west. Well, maybe not. But anyway, the wording to me was not clear, and I'll try to work on that perhaps later. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, so I think what Rav Kook is saying, that nations come and nations go, they rise, they become empires, they have tremendous influence on the world, but they also, so often in history, a very powerful nation conquered others, overpowered others, took taxes from others, unjustly, what's the term in English? Exploited, thank you, exactly, exploited other nations and so on. But in the end, they were so influenced, amongst other things, by the nations that they conquered, that they ended up stopping being their own selves, and it became a kind of mishmash of different nations. And so they were all changing and evolving into such an extent that, even if you notice the same geographical place, it's totally different. Whereas Am Yisrael is in communication with the world constantly, trying to influence, having influence, at the same time being challenged and dispersed, but continuing to keep a certain backbone, spiritual backbone, religious backbone that gives us spiritual and national life throughout all these generations, and that is something that can be a blessing for other nations in the world. Eliezer.
In China and Japan, their national, that they didn't have a national message that they were giving to the world. And like Japan became powerful because of its process of westernization, although they had a rich culture before, which actually people in the West, they use Japanese art and things like that. But the message didn't exist. And also in China, I don't think China really is a Confucius state now. So
they have a famous thinker or a person with some kind of moral message, but it's not that this was the Chinese culture and something that was major in China over generations and in conversation with other kinds of philosophies or beliefs or values in the world.
Exactly.
Okay. I think it's good if we move on to the second paragraph, because I brought them together because I think they are kind of discussing within themselves. So let's move on to the second paragraph, which is 15 here. Okay. Until now, this is very interesting, and it's one perspective on the issue of anti-Semitism. Of course, I'm sure there are many other perspectives. Until now, our influence on the world has primarily been in encouraging people to accept obligations, morality, and justice rooted in faith in God. Obligations, I might add limitations, things that we don't do. But the world doesn't like accepting obligations. And even if it does accept them, there remains a lingering resentment towards those who had that influence, because such obligations limit the free expansion of the more primal barbaric soul. But when the time comes for the world's light to be revealed, it will become clear to all that what we bring to the world are true paths of life, of genuine delight that grant life its value, and pleasure, happiness, and life's meaning. These are things everyone longs for, and the source that brings joy and delight is honored and cherished. That is why the prophet Zechariah says, prophesying something for the future, 10 men from all languages of the nations will take hold of the corner of the garment of a Jewish man, saying, "Let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you." In other words, Zechariah is giving a prophecy that one day in the future, people of the world, nations are going to be running after Jews, saying, "Please take me with you, show me, because I see that you have a blessing. We want that blessing as well." So once again, just to give a very basic explanation, I can give a different perspectives on it, but I think it's pretty clear that Am Yisrael teaches that no, you can't be barbaric, you can't just be unjust towards others, you can't just because you're stronger be violent towards someone else and take from someone else and so on, and you have to hold back about certain things, and the world has accepted that to a large extent. And at the same time, I think of it a little bit like someone who's in a process of maturing, and on the one hand accepts that it's necessary, on the other hand holds a grudge against the person, or as the ChatGPT translated it, has a lingering resentment towards the source that influenced in this way, because I'm much more happy to just let go and be, let my desires roam around the world freely without any obligations. But in the future, the light will be revealed, and everyone will understand that it's not just obligations, that the obligations give us something which is deeper and better. It gives us something which is more pleasant, brings better happiness to the world, and brings meaning to our lives. And therefore, everyone will say, "Oh, wow, thank you, because what you gave me through those obligations and limitations, you gave me something which is greater and more happy and more pleasant." and everyone likes that and says, wow, I want to go with you. So on the one hand, I hear Rav Kook saying this is part of, the reason, part of what happens in anti-Semitism. And on the other hand, it's hopeful and optimistic for the future. And I think if you put 14 and 15 together, so there's something that Am Yisrael has to give to the world, but in order for the world to get what we're trying to give, you have to go through a process of understanding that it's demanding from you, but it's for your own good. In the long run, when you see that good, when you experience that it's good for you, then you will be grateful for it. But I'd like to hear what everybody else has to say.
Basically, I'm sorry. Basically, what we understand from this is that the other nations have not reached a degree or level of their own to live in a proper way, which we view as proper, as good for everybody. That's what it sounds like.
Even if it's not, I have to say, even if it's not 613 mitzvot,
right,
it's faith, it's non-violence,
right,
it's not gilui arayot, so it's not sexual, promiscuity without restrictions. It has restrictions, but it guides you to a more devoted and committed life in so many different spheres, and it's a better life. Doesn't necessarily mean 613 mitzvot, but even if you mentioned Bnei Noach before, Tova, even accepting Noahide laws gives you a better,
right.
a more meaningful life, and even Rav Kook would say with more pleasure and happiness, maybe less immediate pleasures and happiness. You have to be able to, what's the term? Litchot sipukim in Hebrew, to be able to
deferred gratitude.
To what?
Litchot sipukim.
Oh.
Litchot sipukim means to, it's something what I want right now. One of the things we learn from when we're little children through
To postpone satisfaction.
Exactly. I think Mark said to delay gratification, to be able to say,
yes, good.
I don't have to have everything I desire right now.
Right.
And that gives you a better life and more pleasant and happy and meaningful life. So that's the point.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that we are talking from our perspective, from our knowledge of the laws and that we have, but those people don't have that. They're not on that level of
I'll give an example of what you're saying. I think that people who keep Shabbat, people who don't keep the laws of Shabbat, and look at people who keep Shabbat, often think, wow, that's so difficult. Those poor people, they're not doing this on Shabbat, they're not doing that on Shabbat. Oh, they must be suffering terribly. People who keep Shabbat are very, I'm not saying about every detail. I know some details are more difficult than others, and sometimes depends which person, what detail bothers him. But in the overall picture, when you keep Shabbat, you're happy with Shabbat, and it frees you to do other things and focus, and you're happy about delaying those gratifications. They can wait till Motzei Shabbat. I have 6 other days to have those, and this one day gives me so much. So on the one hand, you're restricting yourself and accepting obligations and restrictions and limitations. On the other hand, you see that it brings you pleasure, happiness, and meaning. So it's just one example. But you're right, though. Someone who doesn't keep it maybe doesn't understand it. You have to experience it to understand it. Eliezer.
First of all, I'd like to borrow a chat, whatever it is. I think you keep on using better words than obligations, maybe limitations or restraints or something like that.
Okay.
And
so you're saying chat is not given from heaven. We're allowed to make variations on chat.
Right.
Okay.
And again, expansion, maybe more like a free range or something like that. Again, you said something like that. And now, as far a little comment about Shabbat, I think of Shabbat as a release, that you don't have to have all the daily worries, and you don't have to. Anyway, but I felt what he said here might have been more believable in his time and in the 90s, especially in the 1990s, that
1990s?
1990,
1990s, you mean?
after he passed away.
He passed away in 1935.
Right. But I think what he wrote is very appropriate for the 1990s, because I thought at that time Israel was, doing great, and that over the world, Jews all over the world were very highly respected, both Orthodox and unorthodox Jews. For example, except for a mistake, technical mistake, probably there would have been a Jewish vice president in 2000.
Okay.
And we knew he was a very respected person. And well, I don't want to go on, but I think that that's kind of the ideal, that that Jewish culture and Jewish values are also the Jews in the civil rights movement. And everywhere you looked, there were Jews leading the world.
Well, I think the main question then would be who's responsible for the fact that stopped, and is it because of is it because there was something missing in that in itself? Is it because of a couple of 100 million Arabs who were just waiting behind the scenes there for an opportunity, and they got that opportunity, or we gave them that opportunity, whatever it is? Or is it because we started becoming haughty and we started making mistakes? These are, I don't want to get into that because it's, but I don't know specifically, but I think Rav Kook is not because I'm a total chassid of his. I mean, I look up to him, but I'm not, but I don't. No, I'm not, because I am in the sense that he says you can learn my Torah and you can think about it freely and agree with me or disagree with me. So in that sense, I can be as chassid and disagree with him when I choose to. I'm saying not a chassid in the sense that I have to glorify everything that he says. But I do think that he's looking at it from a higher point of view, and not, this generation or that generation. He's looking at it in a more, idealistic, maybe even what's the term, kind of fantastic perspective. But if you think of something that it's what's the term in English about something that futuristic, and we're never really going to get there. What's the term? Utopian, exactly. Thank you. Maybe even in a utopian sense. But what's good about the utopian perspective is that we can strive and make progress and get as close as we can. So in that sense, I think I can take his perspective and try and implement it in the world, even if it's not.
I was criticizing our cooking in a way. I think this is beautiful, and this is something we should be striving for.
Yeah.
And it's just basically
Okay.
I like this section a lot. I think it's terrific. I really like the section a lot.
The second one, 15.
It's very inspiring.
Can I say something?
Just let me make one comment though, if I may. But in the third paragraph, I don't understand the use of the word languages of the nation. 10 men from all languages of the nations. Why not 10 men from all the nations? I don't understand that.
It's probably a question not about the English translation, but about the original pasuk. Mikol, the original pasuk is Mikol leshonot hagoyim. Languages as an expression of nations, because in Parashat Noach, Hashem disperses the nations and their languages. So languages is just a certain characteristic of having different nations or different languages.
Good enough.
Michael, go ahead.
So number one, I like Rabbi ChatGPT. I think he did a good job.
Rabbi Professor for you.
Rabbi Professor, of course, of translation skills. I think this gives us a sense of perspective in two ways. It shows how do we see ourselves and how does the world see us. So we see ourselves as what paragraph 1 was about. This small but very influential nation that still has influence after all these centuries. It occurred to me when we were looking at that, would that have been the way to describe our influence during the almost 2,000 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, when we did not have a state anywhere, and yet we still had influence throughout the world? Was that as a nation, or was that as people living by the values of Judaism? And we could discuss
Right.
that.
Right.
But the real question is, how does the world see us? Why do they care? You know, it would be very easy to look at the earlier statements and say, what a bunch of chutzpah, that 15 million people think they can influence the whole world. That's nonsense. And yet here we are. And it always strikes me, going back to the number one anti-Semite of all time was Hitler. And my readings about Hitler indicated that what he really resented was about Jews is that he thought we were speaking the truth.
Exactly.
And he didn't like the truth.
We limited, if I look at what Rav Kook is saying here, what he was upset that we limited was the ability of social evolution to develop in the proper way, and the Aryan nation to conquer the world, and we got in his way.
Yes. But
and in that sense, I think he's right.
But if what we were saying was nonsense, I don't know that he would have cared. But he cared a lot.
That's the, like you say, the number one anti-Semite. That's the number one example of what he's saying here. Yeah. And I always feel that it's very encouraging in a sense. Not that I'm happy about Hitler or the Shoah or anything, but the one thing that's encouraging about it is that he made a correct observation that, you know, what stops so-called Aryan nations to develop social evolution and conquer the world is the Jews.
Well, that's the last sentence of the first paragraph. Because such obligations limit the free expansion of the more primal barbaric soul.
Right.
That's that's an amazing construction.
Yes, Ilana.
But in addition,
Let me just ask Michael, you okay, Michael? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll come back.
Thank you. Ilana, yeah.
on the same issue about the values and obligations, the fact is, Hitler aside for a minute, Christianity adopted most of the basic Jewish values. If you look at the beginnings of Christianity, and you look at the fact that they refer to our text as well as the New Testament, and the fact is that we had a very strong moral influence. Our Bible had a very strong influence on the morality of Christianity, and you can't ignore that. It's what we brought to the world.
Yeah.
How it got,
clearly, of
how
course.
it
But
evolved, obviously, is
it's
history.
partial. In part, it continues to influence through Christianity. In part, of course, some of it is not projected in Christianity because they only took it partially, of course. And part of, if we go back to the first paragraph, to 14, what Rav Kook said that gives sustenance to Am Yisrael through all the difficulties and everything is the name of God connected to them and the Torah that lives within them. And the fact that, you know, keeping mitzvot, practical mitzvot, not just spiritual ideas, is in my belief, very strong belief that this is something very important that gives us a strength that the Christians don't have, because we keep these sometimes nudging and what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit frustrating halachot. You know, you have to do this, you're not allowed to do that. And sometimes it gets nitty-gritty, yes, I understand. But that's what keeps it alive, because we keep it up, because we don't give up on it, we don't let go of it. So it gives us this sustenance. And I always say, you know, I think of Pesach and the value of freedom in the world, and I think of how far we go, not to have one little crumb of chametz in our house on Pesach, and not to use a utensil that has the ta'am of chametz, you know, swallowed in it, and we can't use it to cook something because we'll eat something with ta'am chametz. And when we go to this extent to keep the laws of Pesach, that means that Am Yisrael is keeping alive the value of freedom. Because if we just sung songs and spoke about the value of freedom, but didn't keep a framework that keeps it alive, it would be much weaker, and it would just be abstract and kind of lost in the world. So by keeping the Torah, we keep those values. And so therefore, one of the reasons why in Christianity it doesn't get as much strength as it does through Judaism, I believe.
True. That is
Yes.
true.
This is relevant. Berkovich, in that book that we recommended, said that, in fact, Hitler was the culmination of Christian culture, let's say, because the Christianity spread through power history rather than through moral history. And
Through conquering.
through conquering, right. The first Christianity got its first impetus when Constantine converted and started converting everybody else. And then the Western European powers certainly were very warlike. And so I don't know how that fits in, but it might be that Judaism is against, basically Judaism is against power history, and that when somebody is progression, his promotion depends on power history, then he might be an anti-Semite.
Yeah. I would say that this is something that we often discuss, Eliezer, that Judaism, I totally agree, is not looking for power history, for power and influence through power, but at the same time, if you look at the ideas of Geulah and Mashiach, there is power there in the sense that Am Yisrael will be strong, meaning not that we will conquer and be and force others to convert to Judaism, no such idea, but that we will be strong, so we won't be taken over by others. And when we're strong, we will be able to live properly our spiritual life, and that is what will bring the light to the world, not the physical conquering. That's not what we want to do. We want to be strong, never overrun by anyone else. And then we can be strong spiritually, and that's what will make a difference in the world, right? So I think that's correct what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Yeah, in the continuity of what Ilana said, and for me, what we see here from the Rav Kook, it's look like something that a father could say to his children, like, I know what is good for you, but you are too young and you have to grow up and to understand everything, and maybe later you will understand, but it takes time, okay? And after, when you grow up, then you understand and you start to do what your father said. And I have the impression that same example as for Christianity, it takes a lot of time. It's very, very long, but they started to take some pieces and to recognize that the Jewish and that the Torah and everything is their own values, and they recognize that I think that the Pope recognized that the Judaism was the main, the big brother of Christianity. something
Yeah.
which they didn't recognize before. So it
The
takes
late
time.
Pope. We don't yet know the new Pope. You're talking
No,
about
we
the,
don't know. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
But I think it takes time, and and we speak when we speak about nation, it takes more time. So it's
Of course,
yeah.
of course, of course. It's the, it's that, it's like the comparison between a 15-year-old person and thousands of years and billions of people. That's the proportion of the time that it's taking the world in comparison to a person who takes 10 years to mature, but yeah, but I see the point. And it's also difficult for people to accept that, because there's a clear objective difference between a parent and a child in maturity and understanding. And there isn't this objective, scientific, almost scientific difference between Jews and others. So it's much more difficult to speak about it and to spread it in the world. But I also take another thing from what you're saying, and I always think of a child growing up, mostly a teenager growing up, even young children. But a young child does what his parents tell him, basically because he's forced to do so. A teenager is partially forced to do so because he's not independent yet and he can't get along on his own and he needs his parents' home and financial support and so on. But at the same time, he's beginning to understand and to think about things they're saying, even when he's upset about it. And he has this, what Rav Kook wrote in 15, that he has a lingering resentment towards the limitations that his parents put upon him. But at the same time, give him a few years and he's going to come back and say, thank you for the limitations you put upon me. So we can follow that process. It's much more difficult to follow the process of humanity from barbarism to being able to understand that there's something, that there's a pleasure and a gift that you get by accepting limitations. It's much more difficult to follow and to see, but hopefully we can help it move along. Okay.
I like this idea that you've advanced, that if I can put it bluntly, that the Christians are finally, growing up a little bit. Now, just imagine that you're speaking to a person who's a Christian person, and you say, "Oh, you've finally grown up." They're not going to like you for that.
Exactly. So the question is, do we have to? I think we have to be wise. I think we have to not be arrogant. One of the things we studied 2 weeks ago was how, even with, or 4 weeks ago, I don't remember, but the last time we studied was Rav Kook himself saying we do have something unique to give to the world, but at the same time we have to be very, very fine, very refined, not to be haughty about it, and to be able to say I have something to teach the world without being haughty about it is very delicate. And one way to go about it is not to say I have the only thing that's good for humanity to learn, and don't listen to anyone else. I have the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and nobody else has anything to say. That will be haughty. But if I say, listen, I think we have something that the world can benefit from, I'm also willing to listen to someone else and see if I can learn from him. I think that enables a bit more of a possibility of enabling, opening up possibilities of listening. But I agree with your point. It's not easy to project in the world. Let's go on to one further paragraph on the which is moving forward to chapter 8, paragraph 5, which is interesting in a different way. It's not the same topic, but it's also interesting in another way. Rav Kook says the following: I didn't have a good word for these opening words. The broad-heartedness, meaning in Hebrew it's rachvut halev. I have a broad heart. I don't want to love only Am Yisrael. I want my heart to be broad and open and engulfing everyone. I didn't
Inclusiveness.
Yeah, but it's I understand the breadth. I want my heart to be broad. I didn't like the term broad-heartedness, but
Big
the
heart.
idea is I want my heart to be broad and engulfing everyone, embracing everyone.
Maybe open heart. Maybe if the word should
but
open
I think
heart.
broad is right, but it doesn't feel.
Yeah, so maybe
Okay, we got the idea. The broad-heartedness that sometimes seeks to embrace the entire world, all of humanity, within the special affection for the people of Israel, okay, the idea that I want to love not only Am Yisrael, I want to love the whole world and embrace the entire world, I might expect Harav Kook to say, that's wonderful, that's beautiful, that's positive. Says Harav Kook requires careful examination. He doesn't say it's terrible. I could see people who are very strong in their Judaism, in their belief, in their dedication, in their commitment to Judaism. I could see them saying, oh, that's very bad, be careful, it's not good. I could see others saying, oh, that's wonderful, it's beautiful. Harav Kook says, let's examine it carefully. When the clear awareness of the sanctity and unique distinction of the Jewish people stands firmly in its rightful place, and from that clarity, love and goodwill flow generously toward all nations and every person, this reflects the trait of our forefather Avraham. There's an M missing here, I don't know why. I'll blame chat for that. The father of many nations, that is written in Bereshit, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed through you and your descendants. The father of many nations, Av Amon Goyim, is what Hashem says to Avraham when he changes his name from Avram to Avraham, the father of many nations. And the pasuk, all the families of the earth shall be blessed through you and your descendants, is what Hashem says to him in the first commandment, to go from Haran to Eretz Canaan and bring blessings to the world from there. So this is understanding that we have something to give the world, and we want to give it with goodwill and generosity to give it to the world. But there is a state in which this expansive love stems from a dullness of sensitivity and a darkening of the sacred light that comes from recognizing the supreme uniqueness of Israel.
Weakness.
So if nothing, we don't want to be different. We want to be just like everybody else. And we don't want to say where we have anything special to give to the world. We're like everybody else, and therefore I want to embrace everyone. In such a case, it becomes poisonous, and its influence is filled with terrible destruction from which one must distance oneself. So again, I want to bring blessing to the whole world, but it has to be with the understanding that Am Yisrael does. If we go back to the previous paragraphs, we do have something unique that not everybody yet understands, and we want to give this to the world. When we teach the world restrictions and limitations, it's not because we want to be the prison guards who are not letting people do what they want to do. It's because we believe that this in the end goal gives the world blessing, pleasure, meaning, and so on. But if we lose it and we just want to be one with everyone, then we don't have anything good to give to the world, and that's destructive. We must distance ourselves from that. So I think that Avraham, as an example, as a figurehead, as the first father of Am Yisrael, is in many ways a great example of this. On the one hand, separating himself from the rest of the world and creating something which is separate, is even separatist. It keeps to itself. It doesn't mix with others. And Avraham is the beginning of this. And on the other hand, the whole point of this separation is to create something unique that will bring blessing to everyone. And it's a tension that not always is not always easy for the world to understand and to accept. Like you said, Mark, if you talk about what am I going to say to the others, I love you and I really want to do what's best for you, but no, I won't marry you. It's difficult for the world to be able to chop that, as we say in Yiddish. But at the same time, it's something that we have to keep up if we really want to bring blessing to the world. So open for your comments.
I think we see that playing out in today's politics, both in Israel and around the world. A lot of the intense anger at any sort of a conservative government. Yeah, I mean, even if you take Netanyahu out of it, he seems to have a special magnetism. But a lot of it seems to be this idea that, if we act like we're better than everybody else, they'll hate us, so let's not do that. And it, as you say, it dulls what Judaism has to teach. Now, should we be out there shoving Judaism down people's throats? No, it doesn't work. Either they see it as a good thing or they don't. And I think our role is actually to live so that people can see it as a good thing, but you can't make somebody believe it if they don't want to.
Of course. I think we would be very happy to just spread positivity. That in itself would not be enough, because we also have to project the idea of limitations and obligations and things like that, and that's difficult to accept in today's world. But we can keep it up with patience. But the difficulty is that we have to use also other means, forceful means, and to keep ourselves alive. And then even what we all agree we have to do, the world doesn't see it that way, and then we disagree and argue about how far we have to take it, and it makes it very difficult. And it's not easy to get out of this situation and come back to a situation where we can be focused more on the good things that we bring to the world. I like when people like Bennett, say to the world, "Oh, what's the world movement for banning Israeli things? What is it called? The
BDS.
BDS, right? BDS.
BDS, yeah. So okay, you want a BDS? Okay, don't use this, don't use that. Don't use Waze, don't use all these things that Israel has given to the world. Okay, don't use them. But it's a difficult argument. It's difficult to be able to convey that to the world.
What does it mean by dullness of sensitivity?
Sorry, by
What is dullness of sensitivity?
dullness of sensitivity.
The last paragraph, if you're seven.
Yes. This expansive love stems from a dullness of sensitivity towards the sacred light that comes from the supreme uniqueness of Israel. Meaning you lose the sensitivity to what is unique about Am Yisrael. What I do think is better about the Torah of Am Yisrael, I do see something supreme here, and I lose that, and it dulls and it darkens. I don't see it. And then I just want to love everybody, but there's nothing really that I have, nothing unique that I'm here to give everyone. So that's poisonous. That's destructive.
One of and a good example, Ed had just brought up something to me that is something that we teach non-Jews, our friends, not infrequently, which are the customs of death and mourning. That what we as Jews do when a close family person dies is actually quite different than what the Christians do, and it's psychologically much healthier. And when we tell them about it, they say, "Oh, gee, I wish we did that."
Interesting. That's an experience that I don't have. Discussing with non-Jews, no, I'm saying in the sense of discussing with I don't have close enough relationships with non-Jews to have an opportunity to discuss it. And even if I did participate at sometimes in frameworks where we were meeting with Christians, with Muslims or whatever, it was always focused on something that we were discussing, and we never discussed the laws of death and mourning as we never chose that as one of the topics. It's interesting to think about that. The attitude to death, to Olam Haba, to what we do when we lose someone that we love. Could be interesting. Maybe one day in the future I'll be able to discuss that with some group. Interesting.
I have a challenge. It seems to me we're opening in my mind anyway, an existential challenge. So I have the following. You talked about utopia a few minutes ago. And suppose we imagine a utopia. Suppose we in Israel here achieve a utopia, namely peace. And we are totally at peace. It's wonderful. But we are completely isolated from our neighbors and from the rest of the world. Is that a price we would be willing to pay for peace?
What does it mean, peace, if we're isolated from our neighbors?
We have no need to, our borders are totally secure.
Meaning it's not peace, it's security.
Nobody's attacking us. We could be, in Mars somewhere or something, doesn't matter. We're just, we're an entity unto ourselves. We can do whatever we want within our own body politic. And we are at peace with the world in the sense that we are separate from it.
In other
Is
words,
that a price that we're willing to pay?
it's not peace with people, it's security. We're not really making peace with other nations.
I wonder.
It's not non-war. We have no violence agreement. But it's not peace.
Well, that's interesting. That in itself is a very interesting question. What does peace really mean? Because I think what you're saying then is peace actually means not only security, but also means the ability to live within the world.
To have a relationship with
To
other
have
people.
a healthy relationship with everybody in the world. That's what peace means.
Well, by definition, when you have a peace treaty with somebody, it will lead to economic interaction, to doing business across borders, to travel between the two. It's much more inclusive than just no war.
Well, we've succeeded with Egypt and Jordan to maintain for decades a non-war so-called peace, but no real relationship agreement.
Cold peace.
Yeah.
Frozen peace.
Frozen. There you go.
Yeah.
But my question is that a bargain we'd be willing to make? We have complete security, but we're isolated.
Better than what we have now, but it's not Mashiach.
Not ideal.
Mark, would you be willing to do that?
I have no idea. It's just a question that occurred to me as we're talking about this utopia and what we mean and our relation to the other nations and to our neighbors. I don't think I'd go for it because I don't think that we internally would ever have peace.
You've imprisoned yourself.
Yeah. By the way, I will once you've said that, Mark, I will add one thing, and maybe we should end with that. And that is that I am afraid that there's a tension. It's not an inevitable tension. It can be resolved, but there is a tension between keeping a separatism, a separate framework of Am Yisrael, and having not unlimited open relationships with the nations around us. And I'm afraid that Am Yisrael is not strong enough to maintain that tension, in the positive sense of tension, that complexity rather than tension, to be able to be in a, I think there are many Jews who have relationships with non-Jews. I can think of the Kornman family in Fort Worth, Texas, and others. You can have non-Jewish friends around you and discuss with them and so on, but you obviously keep your own Jewish identity, and I think they know that and they accept that. But and I know many other people who do that. A lot of our friends in Ra'anana and in Israel, are business people, and they're in high tech, all kinds of things, and they're projects that are international and in contact with non-Jews all the time, and then there are constructive relationships, and they can have a meal together and have a drink together and so on. And at the same time, they within themselves keep very clear boundaries when it comes to special Jewish days and kashrut and marriage and so on. But I'm afraid that Am Yisrael is not ready for that, and that's one of the things that keeps us from being able to reach that point, is that we are not yet ready as a nation to handle that. And another cynical remark about this is cynical, and not because I like being cynical, because it's cynical in its content, is that those who are more strong, committed religiously, are the people that it's easier for them to maintain relationships, constructive, friendly relationships with non-Jews while keeping boundaries.
Right.
But they're the ones who don't want to, because they think it's not good for Jews to be in good relationships with non-Jews. And Jews who are happy to be in good relationships with non-Jews and they don't care about it, they're the ones for whom it's dangerous. So I don't have a solution for this catch-22 kind of situation, but it's just a comment on our reality, not something that I have a solution for right now. In the long run, I believe it's solvable, but we have to be We have to be aware of it and care about it in order to be able to maintain that solution.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'd like to suggest, I don't know if I'll have one other session on this topic if I haven't thought of it yet, but maybe one more and maybe we'll move on. But if we do go to some topics in Rav Kook, I'm trying to think, it could be about the modern generation that Rav Kook saw in his time, that left Judaism and connected to Am Yisrael, and how he saw that complexity. It could be about faith and kfira. How would you say, what term would you use in English for kfira? Total non-belief in God in Judaism, atheism, possibly heresy, so on. Rav Kook has very interesting things to say about that. I think he has interesting things to say about physical and spiritual, the meeting or the complex relationship between physical and spiritual, and we are physical and spiritual beings. And what does Judaism say about it? Because many rabbis in Jewish philosophy over generations were very much were stressing the clash between physical and spiritual, and let's lessen all the physical aspects of life so that let's minimalize the physical aspects of life, and through that we will maximize the spiritual sides of life. And now Rav Kook was saying, no, we want a different kind of relationship. So all these are different options. So if there's something that you think or you would like us to discuss, or something else you'd like to raise a question, what does Rav Kook say about A, B, or C? That could be helpful for me to guide me towards what would be significant and interesting for everyone. You can say it right now, or you can send me a note, whatever you like. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Thank you. Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. See you soon.
See you soon.